Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. My son was born extremely preterm after a very high-risk pregnancy. I was only 24 weeks and 5 days along, and it was just such a tumultuous experience. There's so much baggage, I guess you could say, that I just carried from one issue after another all the way through after he was born and into the new phase of our life. You know, we'd gone from fertility treatment to very high-risk pregnancy to now a very lengthy NICU stay because of his prematurity. And 2 weeks, it was about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks after I delivered him, I was visiting him in the NICU. He was so tiny. I mean, this was just the beginning of months and months of living in the hospital. And one of the staff members right outside the unit came up to me and said, "Wow, you look great. You can't even tell you had a baby recently." And I know that she was trying to be polite and trying to be encouraging and kind. But I remember immediately turning around and running to the bathroom and crying for like 10 minutes. Because I was 2.5 weeks out from delivery. I was 2.5 weeks postpartum. I was already in my pre-pregnancy jeans because I was not pregnant for very long. I didn't gain very much weight because I delivered in the middle of the second trimester. And whatever weight I had gained, I lost so much of it in muscle mass because I was on bed rest for so long. The last 15 days of my pregnancy, I didn't move. I was bedridden for 15 days. And for anyone who hasn't done that, I was shocked myself at how quickly you lose muscle mass when you don't move. And so she was right. You couldn't tell. There was no evidence that I had had a baby. There was no evidence that 2 weeks ago I was carrying that little guy in my stomach and that I really actually should still be carrying him. I mean, literally, other than the 2 places in my arm where they had me on an IV for basically the whole time I was in the hospital for those 15 days trying to stay pregnant. Other than that, there was nothing different in my body. And I had a really hard time with that. I had a really hard time at looking at myself and accepting my body after this pregnancy because it reminded me of all the ways that it had failed, all the things that it couldn't do that I needed it to do, and it just couldn't do it. And I know that this is not something that's unique to me. You know, in the larger scheme of things, women in general, we have such a hard time with our bodies. From such a young age, we're shown images and portraits of what it means to be the ultimate woman and ultimately feminine, or whatever that means, you know, from the sleek, slender images of the perfectly toned abs to the perfectly round curves of a big, beautiful pregnant belly to the svelte figure of a postpartum mom who managed to melt all that pregnancy weight away in like 2.7 days. You see all these images and you go, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? And then you throw in challenges like infertility, bed rest, pregnancy complications, prematurity. You throw all of that into the mix. It is a recipe for body image disaster. This is why I am so glad to have my friend and colleague here today to talk about body image and how to maintain a healthy body image even when your fertility and pregnancy journey is less than ideal or just plain awful. Because you have enough stressors on your plate and, truth be told, enough fertile ground for developing depression. Body image should not fuel that fire. You don't need it. You don't deserve it. Lindsay Stenovec is a San Diego dietitian nutritionist and owner of Nutrition Instincts. Her mission is to help you make peace with food and your body. She doesn't want women to waste another minute of their precious life obsessing over every bite of food, and she can help. Welcome, Lindsay. I'm so excited that you're here.
Hi, Parijat. Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate you inviting me to be on this show, and I have been listening to your podcast leading up to this recording, and I just think you're doing amazing work and providing an incredible resource and support for women out there who are going through some really very real, challenging experiences throughout infertility and pregnancy and delivery. So
thank you so much. And I know when we connected, it was just like the sky opened, like, oh my gosh, yes, you and I need to meet. We need to talk. Because the work that you do is incredible. And when we started talking about how it pertains to women like me who had so many challenges even having a family, the work that you do becomes even more precious, because this body image stuff just bleeds into all aspects of your life if you don't get it under control.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And, the reason why I started the Nurtured Mama in the first place was because I saw that there was this huge gap. I had been working in food behavior and body image for years, with all kinds of people. And once I went through my motherhood experience, just sort of being up close and, living that, not my motherhood experience, I'm still in my motherhood experience, but the transition into parenthood and going through pregnancy and postpartum and things like that, of just realizing, wow, there are a lot of needs that aren't being met in care for women during this time. And oh my gosh, I have one area that I could probably fill a gap for, and so that is why I started talking about this in the first place. And I will even just say, in opening up as well, with this episode, like, this is not going to be an episode about putting a smile on your face and just loving your body no matter what, and just saying everything's okay and that there are more important things to be worrying about. That was another thing that when I set out to start the Nurtured Mama, that I was saying, let's not add shame on top of shame. So we're all going to feel, for many different reasons, different or bad, or experience life through our bodies in a negative way, and to not say, oh, well, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or you shouldn't be feeling bad in your body. I mean, even out of the context of going through traumatic experiences, just living in a world, like you in your opening of describing kind of what images we are seeing from birth, of bodies.
And to speak to what you were right, and to speak to what you were just saying, I mean, telling anyone they shouldn't feel anything is the worst thing you can tell somebody,
right,
when they're feeling anything. Like, let's just be real. That's the worst thing you could possibly say. Especially when depression is a factor as well. It's like, oh, well, you should just, at least this. You should just, appreciate this. Or, you should just be grateful. Being someone who experienced postpartum depression, I had, people say those things to me during that time. And I remember just thinking, that's like pretty much one of the worst things you could probably say to someone who's in the throes of depression. It's awful. Exactly. And like the story that I just mentioned, right? Like, I know that woman was being very kind. She was trying to make me feel better. But, and so when I told this story to a couple friends in my family, they were like, well, hey, at least you look good. I'm like, what? Like, no, can I just feel what I'm feeling? Can I just feel bad? Because I'm grieving. I'm grieving the fact that I'm not pregnant anymore. And why can't that be okay? Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be so difficult to hear. And in our culture makes it so acceptable to make comments about about other people's bodies in general, and especially during this time. And we think we're being complimentary. But I literally just had not the same discussion, but a very similar discussion with Julie Duffy Dillon, another colleague, who had the same, things to share of people saying, you look great. And she was just like, I didn't know how to respond. So I think it's so critical that we're saying these things and explaining, like, hey, when you say that, you don't necessarily know what I'm going through or why you think I look great, why that might be. Looking, quote, great by cultural expectations doesn't say hardly anything at all, if anything, about actually what someone is going through. Yeah, no, that is such a good point. That is such a good point. I know after I delivered him and he came home, I developed actually a health complication that required me to take some pretty strong medications and made me gain some weight. And all my life I'd been made fun of because I'm so petite and I'm so thin. And so when I gained weight, people were like, "Oh, you look fantastic. Finally, you have, you got some meat on your bones." And in my head, I'm going exactly what you're saying. You have no idea. I feel miserable. This is not the kind of weight that I want. I am sick right now and I don't feel good.
Yeah, and it shuts down that authentic connection and conversation in a time that you really needed that. With certain people, maybe not strangers on the street, but people who were close to you, you needed to have a more deep conversation. And when someone's like, "You look great," it's like, where do we go from there? Actually, I feel awful,
Right.
These are all the things I'm going through.
Exactly. So in your line of work, what are the most common body image concerns that you see with women who are trying to get pregnant or who are pregnant?
Well, I think that obviously runs the gamut because, everyone's very different and their lived experience in their bodies has to do with so many factors, what they're going through personally, the size of their bodies and, responses that they receive in public, right? The cultural messaging that we hear about different sizes of bodies. So someone in a smaller body is going to have a different lived experience in the world than someone living in a larger body. And that means that when they, if they go through an infertility experience or something traumatic, or, go through a high-risk pregnancy, that is going to impact the way they kind of experience also their body image. So that really runs the gamut. But I think, the most important, there's a lot of important things I think to bring up. But first of all, I see body image issues as kind of having two main layers. And within those layers, it gets pretty complicated. But, you've got your surface level of where your brain goes to the appearance, my belly is this, my arms look like this, my boobs are this, and this kind of dialogue that we can have in our own minds or outwardly with friends where we're talking about our appearance and our dissatisfaction with appearance. And then we have like that deeper level of oftentimes what that top level is kind of representing, so to speak, or metaphorically, representing. And so we have that deeper level where we've got what it's like to actually be living in our bodies, thinking about the word embodiment. That word was first introduced to me by a duo of colleagues that own a company called Be Nourished, and they talk about embodiment and body image, and they're just amazing, an amazing resource, Be Nourished. And so we've got these two layers, and the appearance level experience oftentimes is, like I said, representing those deeper things that are going on for us. I think in a more recent episode, you had mentioned the experience of going through, whatever traumatic experience you're going through in your body, particularly during fertility, pregnancy, birth, and the natural tendency to disengage with your body at that point as a survival mechanism, right? Yep. And when you said that, I was like, yes, I'm going to bring that up because this connects. So if it's survival for us to disconnect and disengage from what's going on in our bodies because that's how we're going to get through it, then of course it's going to be a little messy and difficult to re-engage. And if we're not living in our bodies, we're not really engaged with what's going on from the neck down, and we're constantly in our minds with what stories we're telling about what's going on, it's going to come out from a body image perspective. It could impact our experience with food. It's absolutely going to impact our relationships with ourselves. And again, that's going to manifest in a million different ways. But I think even to know that, as a woman living on Earth, or as a human living on Earth, to know that can happen, to know that that's part of the experience, and to know that when it does impact the way you feel about your body, that there was a function there was a survival function to sit with it, to get to know that a little bit, and to give yourself time to reconnect. I'll let you kind of respond to that for a second, and then I have some things you can sort of dive into that are more surface level that can help you feel better in the moment, but won't necessarily be diving into like the deep roots of things.
Yeah. And I imagine that that's also very personal based on each individual of kind of really what those roots are and all of that. But I totally, I mean, I'm just sitting here listening to you and I'm like, yes, keep going, keep talking, because I'm just like nodding along because I absolutely love what you're saying. I mean, there's so much that we're not talking about, number one, and we're not taught even how to do it. And like you're talking about, and you know, you and I've had conversations about this too, when we disengage from our bodies, to re-engage can feel really scary.
Absolutely.
Because there's a reason why you've disengaged to begin with. And so to give yourself that compassion to say, hey, I understand why this happened. There's nothing wrong with me that I did that or that I'm doing that now. I understand where that came from. And now I'm ready to be involved, really be present in my body, but recognize that, hey, that can be really scary to do. And you know how I see this show up a lot is when I do work with my postpartum women who have gone through a high-risk pregnancy or delivered preterm, and they're ready to be intimate with their partners again. And all of a sudden, I mean, that whole experience is you have to be engaged in your body. Otherwise, you're completely not there, right? Mm-hmm. And it forces you to be right in there in the present. And if you haven't done it already, if you are disengaged from your body, that experience can be really triggering for a lot of women. And so a lot of the postpartum work I do is really to undo all of that and really get you back in your body. But all that to say is it happens exactly like you said, because what you're going through is feeling unsafe. It's feeling really scary. And that's our way of protecting ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's such important work to be doing for people to have that support and resource in you to be able to go and do that kind of deeper exploration. And it's so true. It's really common to have body dissatisfaction around our cores as women, and that happens to house our, reproductive organs and, our, like where the baby grows, and it's going to be the area where there are going to be a lot of experiences, especially if someone's going through infertility, shots that they're having to have, and surgeries, things like that, and pregnancy and birth, and so also knowing there's this groundwork, unfortunately, that's laid on a cultural level where we're already kind of dissatisfied with the way that area looks, the way it feels. There is a lot of emotion that comes out in women if we do exercises around even just lovingly touching their stomachs. And so
isn't that true?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and it's pretty universal. A lot of, women just due to the cultural impact on body image, that's kind of the foundation that's laid. And then to then experience something traumatic around that area of your body, it would also take, and then also to live in a world that doesn't accept any variation or celebrate any variation of the belly. In the terms of appearance, of course that would bring things up. And I think there can be a point where one reaches where they can acknowledge that this is happening, to sort of understand that, when I am beating up on the way my stomach looks or my body looks, or my weight in one direction or another, that there might be some deeper meaning to this. And I can make a choice to understand, why that's there, and then to also continue to care for myself, or to learn how to care for myself while I work out this other part. Because typically, not for everyone, but quite often, there's just a real close connection between I feel bad in my body, and what I've learned is if I feel bad in my body, I should try to change it.
So then you get onto the diets and you start doing crazy exercises. And this is a big problem then for women who are on bed rest.
Totally.
because you can't do anything and you literally are just sitting around, and it's so counter to what you've been told about what your body needs to be able to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've never been through a high risk pregnancy myself. So full disclosure, I have never lived that. But yeah, it's got to be so frustrating and so feeling so oppositional to what your body's allowing you to do or your body is doing and what you wish it was doing or could do, or, not wanting to be in that situation, understandably. And yeah, for that to be such a challenge. And I think your story brings up a whole nother perspective as well, that it's not just about, from a cultural perspective, we look at size and, we don't celebrate larger bodies, but also just the fact that when your body changes, it can be uncomfortable, and it can also, again, it's about your experience as a result of something traumatic that might have happened to you. And just, that it's not necessarily just from like a size perspective in terms of being in a larger body. You could have, experiences in a smaller body as well. And that this is really, that's that deeper part of like, oh, what is really going on here? And why would I feel this way about my body? Oh, yeah, this makes sense because I've just gone through this.
Where do you think these thoughts are coming from? I mean, I feel like we are quick to blame media, and I think there's definitely a huge role media plays in all of this. But do you think it's purely from media that we have these internalized beliefs about what it means to be a woman and to, be in our bodies?
I think from that perspective, yes, I think it's heavily culturally impacted. Now, our personality types, our level of resiliency to cultural messaging, kind of who we are just authentically as humans, it's going to impact how we absorb that information and use it, whether or not we internalize that or not, how much we're able to think critically about it. I think it does absolutely help if we know that we can opt out of that's not something that has to be internalized, that we can sort of choose what to take and what to reject in terms of that. So, when we think about like eating disorders, for example, there is a large genetic component to developing an eating disorder. The majority of people in the United States, for example, diet, right? But not everyone develops a diagnosed eating disorder. And so there is this sort of genetic predisposition. And so that's an example of, you have this genetic predisposition, you're more sensitive to, these messages and things like that. And it could be a very small part of someone's eating disorder, but you may have, looking at certain magazines and things like that might be more triggering for that person than for the next person,
Which is true, I think, for anything that we're talking about, right? If you're especially sensitive to really anything, you're going to have different triggers than somebody else who's not sensitive to the same thing. Yeah.
And going through traumatic experiences definitely increases one's risk of developing an eating disorder, disordered eating, body dissatisfaction, across, all experiences of trauma, not just in the perinatal experience, but yeah, that for people to know that too, that unfortunately there's a pretty high percentage of people who suffer from eating disorders who have had pretty traumatic experiences in their lives, and see that as one of the major triggers for the eating disorder. So to know that, to just know that that's something that, you can be at risk for, and to be getting the support that is deserved and necessary throughout that experience, through both trusted loved ones and professionals. I think it's really critical to have that professional who's not emotionally involved in your life, who can be there to just be there for you and listen and not be asking you for things as people might experience in interacting with loved ones and things like that.
Right. So let me ask you this. I know a lot of women who have gone through fertility treatment, who have delivered preterm, those two groups in particular, and I'm part of both. There is a sense of feeling broken And I remember after my son came home and I was talking to my husband and I was telling him, hey, I feel broken. And he'd always be like, no, don't say that. That's not like, you actually helped save his life and you helped yourself stay pregnant and you did a great job. And I know he's right. But I'll always come back with, well, okay, what would you call a car that doesn't turn on? It's broken. What would you call a cup that doesn't have a handle anymore? Broken, because it's not doing what it's supposed to do. Therefore, I'm broken. This idea of being broken and the story of being broken is something that's so common amongst these groups. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what can women like me and all those other women who are going through this too, who are feeling broken, how can they change that story to be a more empowering one about their bodies?
That's a really good question that I don't know that I have the answer to. I don't know that I've worked intimately with enough women who have gone through that experience to really be able to pull from their stories and sort of compile like their experiences to say, like, this is what I'm seeing, if that makes sense. And this is what seems to be helpful. But what I'm kind of hearing you say is you felt somewhat invalidated by it. Like you knew logically, you're like, yes, he's right. And I would imagine it's incredibly important at the right time to hear that, or to be reminded of that. And for certain people that could feel really empowering. Oh yeah, you're right. Like I'm a total rock star. Like I'm just, I am surviving this. But at the same time, I've heard that a lot from friends, and from some clients or even women kind of in private messaging in my community, that's a really common way to feel and to describe, to use that language, if I'm broken, to describe that time.
Yeah. It comes back to what we started with this episode with, which is this idea that we've got to allow ourselves to grieve the loss of whatever we feel like we've lost. And for me, what helped, and this is kind of the way that I work with my postpartum women too, because I found it to be so helpful for myself, is, okay, the word broken is not one that we want to use because it's not very empowering and it's actually quite discouraging in the way to describe your body. But what's underneath that is I felt like there were parts of my body that didn't work. And they didn't work. That is a fact. They did not work the way they were supposed to. And to really give yourself the opportunity to honor that loss and to really grieve that I wish I could ovulate on my own, or I wish I had, whatever it is, I wish I had blood pressure that was manageable, or whatever it is that you're going through, to give yourself the opportunity to really grieve that, because that's real.
Absolutely. To feel angry about it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's part of embodiment, is to be able to go, actually, no, I can feel this way. Like I don't have to put rose-colored glasses on right now. I love what you were saying in the previous episode, a few episodes ago, of no, it really is this hard. Like it really is this hard. Let it be this hard. Like you don't have to put on the rose-colored glasses right now. And I think in letting that in, of like, oh yeah, this really does suck. Like this is really terrible. It's part of the healing process, and it's part of embodiment of sitting in your body and realizing, like, yeah, I feel this way. And that's how it is, because that is what it is. Like that is the reality of my situation right now. And I think when, there's a point at which, when someone is ready to be able to go, okay, this is how I feel. I'm letting that in. I'm going to sit with this. And while I work that out, what are some things I can do to provide care for myself? Because a lot of the times when we feel that way about our bodies, we can sometimes want to hurt our bodies, or we don't want to take care of our bodies. We're angry at them. It's frustrating. Totally. You feel stuck, And so,
and I would just want to insert here, for those of you that are listening, we're not necessarily talking about self-harm. I mean, that's one way of hurting ourselves, but you can do it in so many different ways. Like you can purposely eat crappy food because you just don't feel like you deserve good food, or you can purposely stop exercising if you are allowed to exercise because you don't feel like you deserve it. So we're not just talking about self-harm, but really all these little ways that we kind of punish ourselves because we don't feel like we want to take care of ourselves while we're going through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it can even be the opposite of I'm going to over exercise, or I'm going I'm going to, not let myself find pleasure in food. I'm going to get really strict with the quote clean eating diet or something, and not let myself like have these moments that are maybe more not that. I mean, we can find joy in lots of different types of foods, but you see what I'm saying in terms of removing those types of foods too.
Absolutely. So just wanted to mention that there for those of you that are listening. This is what we're talking about here. But yeah, tell us what are your maybe top 3 tips for women to have a more positive, more empowered body image who are struggling with it?
Yeah. So I think first starting on that, just doing these surface level things that are not necessary, that's not going to make it all better, but at least it's going to help you sort of get through these little moments or feel a little bit more comfortable experiencing what is going on in your body. And I think, one of the easiest things we could do, like we have to dress ourselves every day, right? And to some degree, I'm actually still in my lounge clothes this morning. But we have to dress our bodies every day, and especially going through fertility treatment, pregnancy, postpartum, like our bodies are constantly changing, and it's so hard to keep up with that. But I think as much as your budget will allow and as much as you can be creative with it, but to dress for the body that you have in that moment. So if you're forcing yourself to squeeze into really small clothing, like that's not helping you live in your body. That's, just making you feel uncomfortable and claustrophobic and more stuck, or, wearing clothes that are not supportive or not comfortable or too big or whatever, just doing something like that to dress for the body you have right now, even if you don't like it. Because we have this sort of message of like, oh, well, you should try to change your body. And 2, when you've changed your body to the point at which it is culturally acceptable and you love it, which is typically a fleeting effort, then you should go out on a big shopping spree and you should buy all the things. And until then, you should maybe even wear clothes that are too small for you, so you feel even worse in your body until you get there, It's like, what?
That's exactly what it is.
So, doing something like that for yourself. If the scale is something that is triggering for you, get rid of that scale. You don't need one more external thing that you actually don't have control over. Changing your mood, impacting you negatively, changing the way you care for your body that day, whether that number's going up or down and that's triggering for you, get rid of it. There's, especially someone who's going through a high risk pregnancy, infertility, etc., like that, you just don't need that extra thing.
Totally.
Sort of throw you
and
off.
You've turned into like just numbers as it is. Right. Everything's just become so clinical as it is. Like you really don't need that. Again, it goes back to that embodiment experience. It's taking you out of your body, looking at these numbers that really don't necessarily mean anything unless you're feeling awful about it. So
exactly.
Why do that?
Exactly.
I love that. I
think surrounding yourself with community and body positive media. So depending on what you're going through, seeking supportive communities where you're connecting with people who actually know a little bit or a lot of it about what you're going through. And also finding communities that are inclusive of all types of people, all sizes of people, all experiences from a body inclusive and body positive perspective. So being selective about like who you're following on social media, especially let's say you're on bed rest, I would imagine you're on social media a lot, and so like that, there's so much opportunity to be exposed to these, Instagram photos that, are not of women on bed rest, and look like they're having, the most amazing happy hour at, whatever. To like be very selective with who you're following, and really thinking about how it impacts your body image and your experience in your body. And are you feeling
just to interject a quick personal story here. I couldn't stand looking at pregnant women who were standing up when I was on bed rest. It was like that sensitive right? Because I just like, I can't even stand. And so I can't look at this stuff. And I ended up hiding people's images or unfollowing them or whatever I needed to do because of exactly what you're saying. Because at some point I was going, this is making me feel miserable.
Yeah.
And do I really need one more thing to make me feel miserable right now?
And you're already going to experience that in the world. You go to the grocery store, you go to the doctor's office or whatever, you already have to, tolerate that trigger. I mean, it's not the person's fault, but it's your lived experience, and there's a reason why you feel that way. And yeah, like why then have to, bombard yourself with those images over and over again? And so, yeah, what you choose to follow is going to be different than what the next person chooses to follow based on their needs.
Sure, totally. And no judgment. No. That's okay. Yeah. Whatever that is for you, it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I focus on is sort of a early introduction to sort of healing your relationship with food. If that is one way that this is manifesting for you, is to drop the good, bad food labeling. So, and I don't mean like, oh, this is so amazing, this is really good, like that kind of good, bad, or this has gotten bad, like it's moldy. But I mean like when it's taking on a moral value and that moral value is then being placed on you. So if you feel like, you have a really strong set of these foods are good, these list of foods, the foods are good, and a list of foods that are bad, and you eat the bad foods, you may start to feel bad, and you might feel like you made a bad choice and that you are maybe even a bad person. You might not think about all those things literally, but that is something I see daily, in my office.
It translates into a feeling.
It translates into a feeling, and it gives food so much power because, oh my gosh, like I wouldn't be able, and I've lived that, in the past years and years ago of like, how can you make a decision sitting down to a restaurant when you're trying to decide if you're going to be a good or bad person,
Oh my gosh, talking about pressure.
That, like that's really loaded. And so to start thinking about one alternative kind of way to sort of shift the labeling, is this food supportive to me or unsupportive to me right now? A time where you're really wanting to enjoy chocolate cake, carrots are not going to be very supportive for you in that moment. They're just,
let's be honest, it's just not going to
work. And vice versa. When you're looking for something refreshing and crunchy and you want an addition to your lunch or whatever, carrots would probably be more supportive in that situation. But that it's really in bringing food into context of like, okay, well, what do I need right now? What does my body need? What's going to be enjoyable? What's going to meet my nutritional needs? Sometimes we have to put sometimes we really do have to put nutritional needs on the back burner in the beginning if we really are struggling with relationship with food, because quote nutritional needs, again, brings back that good, bad, and brings back rigidity and can kind of hijack the choice. That doesn't mean nutritional needs are not relevant or important, but sometimes depending on the individual, we have to kind of put that on the back burner.
Yep. Totally. I'm curious, Lindsay, everything you're saying is so amazing and so important. But you've touched a couple of times on the fact that you need a supportive environment in which to do this. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on how partners can step in and help women have a better body image, especially if they're struggling to conceive or who are pregnant.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a good question. I believe that listening and just being there and not trying to fix it all the time is probably one of the most helpful things. And then also to ask, like, how can I support you right now? How can I be most supportive? Because, this is typically uncharted territory. And our partners may not know how to support us, even in a non-high risk pregnancy and postpartum experience. Even if it goes as planned, like they don't really know. They aren't going through the same thing we are. And so for partners who might be listening, which would be awesome if partners listen to your podcast, that should be like required material. But to just ask that question, hey, one, how are you doing? Like, really, how are you doing? Especially if they notice mood changes or things like that of like, hey, what's going on here? What can I do? How can I support you? And then to just listen. And even if, I think with your example of like, your husband, giving you kind of that feedback is like, no, that's not how it is, which is true. That's a rational thing to say. For women listening to feel like they can say, oh, I know you're right, but right now I can't really internalize that right now, or like to have that open communication, open dialogue. And I think also kind of bringing it full circle with the conversation is to really avoid the "you look great" kind of commenting. You know, like I know everybody means well. I don't want anyone to walk around feeling like their perfectionism is triggered and they can never comment on anyone, and ever again. But to really be thoughtful about these comments about bodies, and that it oftentimes minimizes what's going on for someone. It can kind of shut down the conversation, and it can actually sometimes, in the work that I do with people with eating disorders, they can be in the throes of their eating disorder and really suffering through that. And people are like, you look amazing. It can totally trigger the eating disorder to ramp up. Like, oh yeah, I should keep doing this. So to instead of commenting on, how someone looks, unless it's like you've been on bed rest and your muscles have been depleted and now you're standing up and you're walking around and you seem so much stronger. Like that seems more tangible and appropriate. Like, oh my gosh, I can see you're getting stronger. Not visually like I see your muscles defining, but like, oh wow, you look this way in that sense. So
definitely. This everything you're saying is so, so powerful. And for those of you that are listening, I hope what you're taking away from this is just, I know how hard it can be and how overwhelming and how helpless you can feel when you're going through infertility, when you have a high-risk pregnancy, when you're recovering from prematurity. Your body doesn't feel like your own. But I want you to know that it is yours and you deserve the opportunity to feel how you feel about your body, because that is the path to healing from whatever it is that you're going through. Lindsay, what are your final words of hope for women who are struggling with embracing their bodies?
What would I want to leave everyone with? I think one, that it's normal, that, that it's understandable if you are struggling with this. Two, that there is hope, that this doesn't have to be how you feel all the time, that you, to kind of tap into when you feel ready to start working on this part, to not push yourself as to this being one more thing that you have to try to do or feel like you're failing at doing, to really listen to yourself and kind of move yourself along slowly with this. Some people are going to dive right in and go, yeah, this is what I need and I'm ready for this. And other people are going to be like, I'm not even ready to think about liking my body yet. Don't talk to me about this right now, and that's okay. That everyone's going to be kind of on that spectrum, and to acknowledge where you are, to move yourself along slowly. And for the first thing, for anyone to be doing is to work on, implementing aspects of self-care towards your body and for your body that feel good and feel accessible to you early on. And that, again, it could be very basic, simple things. It doesn't have to, it doesn't mean it's going to like make you feel magically amazing and you're going to start a body positive Instagram account. Like, that it's going to be kind of a slow and depth process, and that you'll learn a lot about yourself during this time and about your own body image as well. So, and with that too, I just want to throw it out there, being somebody who has not experienced this firsthand, if I have said anything in this podcast that feels off, or you think, oh gosh, she totally missed this whole point of, this experience that I've had, feel free to message me. I am all ears to learn more about sort of what it's like for women going through these experiences. So just want to throw that out there.
Oh my gosh, you are so amazing for saying that and for doing that. I know that alone just is going to be so empowering to women to know that there's somebody out there who's willing to learn, who hasn't been through it but is willing to learn. So where can people find you?
So you can find me at the Nurtured Mama community on Facebook. You can go, we're rebranding right now, so we'll have a new new website up soon, but it's thenurturedmama.club, and so that'll be updated soon. It does have a landing page and everything like that right now. And to be honest, it may or may not be the supportive community for you. So you can always jump in, feel it out, depending on where you're at in your life stage and in your experience with parenthood, for you to be able to feel that out. So yeah, you can find me there. I'm on Instagram under The Nurtured Mama. I am pretty much under The Nurtured Mama everywhere, like Twitter, Facebook. The Nurtured Mama podcast just launched in August. Which we're going to need to have you on as well. So we're going to need to talk about scheduling. And I think that's pretty much it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing your expertise and being so open and so real about all of this. Thank you so, so much. I know our listeners just really, truly benefited from your expertise. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for creating this space and for having me on. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm buzzing from this conversation. I mean, like, this is the kind of real conversation that we need to be having. And for those of you that are listening, I really hope you took to heart exactly what we were talking about here, which is it's your body. And I know it doesn't feel like your body when you're going through infertility and you've got all these shots and you've got your body blowing up in different ways that naturally shouldn't be happening, but you're forcing it to do something. Or, you're going through a high-risk pregnancy or you're on bed rest and parts of your body just aren't working the way that they should be. Your cervix is opening when it should be closed and your uterus is bleeding when it shouldn't be doing anything but growing this baby. I get it. I know personally, firsthand, I have been there. And I want you to remember that no matter who's managing your health right now, your fertility health, your pregnancy health, your postpartum health, it is still your body. And you deserve and you need to be able to feel whatever it is that you feel about your body. That is the path to truly healing from what you've been through. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you can head over to iTunes and leave a review so we can get more amazing guests like Lindsay to continue providing you with inspiration and tips on how to get through infertility and a high-risk pregnancy and healing afterwards. And ladies, if you are pregnant with complications or you're on bed rest and you want to know how you can stay pregnant as long as possible, we need to talk because there is a very powerful way to manage your complications at home. So just head over to parijatdeshpande.com and schedule your free consultation so we can chat about how I can help you help your baby. Also, I would love to stay in touch, so follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Parijat Desh. That's PARIJATDESH. In the wise, wise words of Amy Bloom, you are imperfect, permanently and inevitably flawed, and you are beautiful. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.